today is going to be our dear friends from National Nurses United. They have been instrumental working with us on the Detroit water shutoffs. And since they weren't able to join us, they wanted to send an update and let everyone know how everything was going. So the Robin Hood tax campaign now has its 28th co-sponsor, which is the largest number of co-sponsors we have ever had on financial transaction tax in the United States. With the Detroit water shutoffs, we were able to rally people at Netroots, and by doing so, we had a march where there were thousands of people that attended the march, and we actually had actor Mark Ruffalo join us. Additionally, the Detroit emergency manager had to back down on the water shutoffs. Now, the water shutoffs are resuming again, but we are delivering petitions, more than 180,000 signatures to the governor, to the mayor, to the emergency manager. And the people in Detroit are organizing to not only stop the water shutoffs, but to also get the whole situation with gentrification under control. The nurses were at the NAACP convention, and they were able to get the endorsement of the NAACP on the Robin Hood tax. So this is really, really huge. This week, the nurses are incredibly busy. They are at the Ohio State AFL-CIO convention, and they are expecting to get the AFL endorsement for the Robin Hood tax. And the Robin Hood tax campaign is going to, I love this, they're going to save the planet. They will be marching on Sunday at the People's Climate March in New York. So the Detroit water shutoffs and the National Nurses Robin Hood tax campaign all rolled up in one. Who says progressives are not efficient? All right, now, in keeping with what we always do at these progressive roundtables, because we know how incredibly valuable our members' time is, especially when Congress is in session and there are votes and bill markups and everything else going on. I want to welcome, and it's his first appearance here, Representative Hank Johnson from the Georgia 4th District, who is actually going to do a little double dipping for us. Representative Johnson is one of the founders of the Medicaid Expansion Caucus, which is a really critical issue for PDA. And he has also drafted a very important piece of legislation that calls for militarization of the police, which PDA has also endorsed. So, Representative Johnson, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and welcome you all. My privilege and honor to be here amongst all of you. First, I will talk about the state Medicaid Expansion Caucus. It arose out of the fact that there are so many people who, due to the politics being played by their state governors and legislatures, are being deprived of the medical care that could help save their lives in some cases, and in other cases just enhance the quality of life. And so this very generous proposal by the federal government to fund 100% of the costs associated with bringing more people into the state Medicaid system, and thereafter 90+% up through 10 years, and states would be able to solve a lot of their unemployment issues. It would contribute to the economy in so many different ways, but yet it was stuck, and it's still stuck in these recalcitrant jurisdictions, and people are suffering. What my friend from Florida, Alan Grayson. I mean, he told the truth when he stood up in the well of the House and told the American people that the Republican plan, alternative plan, was death. And I'm happy that he is back with us. But that was the truth. And so I'm glad now that we've got about, 27, Scott? 27 states that have opted in, a few run by Republican governors. And so the whole thing is to get these other states to stop refusing the money, stop playing politics, go ahead and expand public interest and promote the general welfare with this state Medicaid expansion caucus. With respect to the militarization, the Stop Militarizing Law Enforcement Act, this was something that came to my attention last Christmas. I was at a Christmas parade in one of my local jurisdictions, very small jurisdiction. And go a block from there, and it was a block from the traffic signal when you got into the city, and then one block, and then boom, you're out of there. And so there was a parade that this municipality had, and there was probably all of 10 cars or whatever in the parade. Very modest, but something that they do to promote their burgeoning downtown. And so I had the position of behind the mayor. And the mayor was riding in a great big monstrosity piece of military hardware that just seemed so out of place. I couldn't see around it. I couldn't see over it. I mean, I was just marveling at how big this thing was as I walked. She rode, I walked. And so came back and asked the staff to look at, try to find out, how the city acquired that vehicle. I asked her, what were you all using this vehicle for? And she said, well, whenever we have a snowstorm, we can pull cars out of the ditch. And I thought that was a pretty humongous tow truck. Yeah. But anyway, we started looking into the program, and we stumbled upon articles that talked about the lost. First we learned about the 1033 program, which enables local law enforcement agencies to receive this kind of equipment from the Department of Defense. And then we saw where for property that had been transferred from the Department of Defense to the local law enforcement agencies, and now this military-grade weaponry is missing. It can't be accounted for. And so that got us, because as a former local elected official, a county commissioner, I understood the fact that when my county had no further use for certain equipment, and they just put it in a quarterly auction. and it goes to the highest bidder, often for pennies, really. And so I thought of the specter of domestic organizations being in receipt of this heavy military equipment and what kind of a threat it could pose to law-abiding citizens. And I came to the conclusion that we needed to put some controls on that program. And so we started working with the ACLU, and also there's an organization of Quakers that I can't recall the name of. Scott? Yeah. Okay. All right. And we work with them, drafting version after version of the bill. Then we started chopping it to colleagues here on the Hill and started getting feedback and started further refining the bill. And the bill was ready to be filed before we left session for the August work period. And we decided to not file it during those last few days because I wanted to get some publicity out of it. And so I said, we'll wait. And then, we had Ferguson, and I'm sitting in my home with my TV on, watching the events in Ferguson as the police are breaking up peaceful demonstrations. They're coming out with this equipment. It was mind-boggling to me. And so there began a real groundswell that still exists today. The American people have seen the misuse of this equipment, and there's so much more that has yet to be seen in terms of the misuse through the program of this equipment. And so I filed legislation yesterday that's bipartisan, three very conservative Tea Party Republicans, Raul Labrador out of Iowa, Mr. McClintock, Idaho, yeah. And who else? From Kansas, Mr. Justin Amish, and from Michigan. Okay, all right, so, but anyway, we have 20 total co-sponsors, and I think we will continue to grow that number as we move forward. So I want to thank you all for your assistance. Thank you for your support, and I'll turn the mic back over.
Thank you, Congressman. We've got one question. We're going to take a look at getting your bill in our October letter drops. Quick question, Stephen.
Yeah, the bill number. Scott?
It is HR 5478.
Thank you. HR 5478. All right. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I've got a subcommittee meeting that I have.
And we know that. Thank you so much.
We got a vote going on, Hank. Do we? Yeah, we got a vote right now.
Just one vote?
Three.
All right. Well, hopefully you'll be able to run back and join us. Take care. Take care.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
The votes are 15 minutes long,
Okay.
so if you want me to go, I could go, and then.
You can go and come back.
No. I cannot come back. I can talk now, and then. Yeah, come on over.
Come on up. Come on down. Come on down.
All right, hey, everybody. So, hey, you guys.
Representative Keith Ellison.
Good to see everybody. How's everybody doing today? Let me tell you, I'm really, really, really excited about Hank's legislation. I'm on this bill. I think I'm original co-sponsor. My friend Hank. Hank's busy, but I think, is that right over there?
Scratch on the bill, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm on the bill. So this is Frank, another Progressive Caucus member doing great things to help America be more democratic, more equal, more fair, more appropriate. So Hank Johnson a progressive hero in my book. Thank you, sir. All right. So the bill I'm bringing for you today is a bill we do hope earns your support. It's called the Employee Empowerment Act. Simple question. If our union density is around 9-8% in America today, down from about 33% in the 1950s, yet if you ask workers, do you want to be in a union, upwards of 58% say, I do want to be in a union. What accounts for the discrepancy? Intimidation. You say, hey, we want to join the union, and the boss guy says, well, then I guess you don't want to work here. Right. You're fired, you're out, or they cut your hours or they won't put you on the schedule. So then what is your recourse? Well, the National Labor Relations Act allows you to go file a complaint. And maybe in 18 months or so, you might get your job back, if, maybe. And if you do, they're going to subtract all the money you made between the time you were fired and the time you got reinstated, even unemployment. And so from a union busted employer standpoint, it's like a cost of doing business, right? To just throw people out. And in my good friend Paco Fabius back there, we've had a few cases where people fast food workers who've been striking have been retaliated against. And so this is a huge issue. So once, you may want a union, but you need a job. And if you're banging it out at $7 an hour, boy, you really cannot afford to not be working. So what is the solution to the problem? I think we always say labor rights are civil rights. We always say labor rights are human rights. And in international conventions, it says you have a human right to join a union. And when Martin Luther King lost his life, he was marching with sanitation workers with the support of AFSCME to get their rights in that case. And even when we had the March on Washington in 1963, 50-some years ago, it was paid for by UAW. We act like union, but the truth is today, the NLRA is pretty much all you got if you're fired. So what does this bill do, the Employee Empowerment Act? It says that if you are fired for union activity, you may access the civil rights law to vindicate your claim. You may sue them just like they fired you because you were black or you were a woman or you were from Iran or you were any national origin, sex, race, national origin, any reason that you have for civil rights, we treat union organizing like that. And we didn't amend the civil rights law, but we referenced it as the place where your rights could be vindicated in the same way as if they violated your labor rights. Now, we don't get rid of the right for the National Labor Relations, for you to go to the National Labor Relations Act. Why? Because maybe you don't want to get punitive damages, get compensatory damages. Maybe you don't want to do discovery where you can, I don't know, serve notice of deposition on the CEO of the union busting company. Maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you just want to have them investigate your claim, and if you win, you win. But if you do want to take advantage of those other rights, I believe you should. And so we went out and we got a bunch of members to sign on it. We got some really smart people to help us with it. We met with all the civil rights groups. We met with all the labor organizations. And people are excited about this bill. We need PDA to join this fight and be part of this effort. We really believe that it would make a big difference. And I just want to tell you that this bill, I believe, could really make a big difference. Let me just wrap up by saying this. If you believe you're going to do something about income inequality in America, if you believe you're going to do something about income inequality in America, but you're not going to strengthen the right to organize, you're not doing anything. We have got to put some real teeth in the right to bargain collectively, or we're going to have real difficulty ever elevating the working people of America to a state of prosperity where, let me just give you a quick example before I pass the microphone. The Paco and them guys are asking for 15 in the union. Am I right about that? So You hear people say, oh, 15 union, that's too much, that's too much. Price of your hamburger and your fries is going to go up. They say these things, right? Well, the CEO of McDonald's makes $9,200 an hour. $9,200 an hour. And he's saying that these people can't get 15 an hour? Come on, man. You know what I mean? It's just ridiculous. It's crazy. They got plenty of companies where the disparity between the lowest paid worker, well, the average paid worker and the CEO is up in the $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 range. And we cannot have a democracy like that, because what do these guys do with all the extra money they get? Well, they go rent politicians who do what? Get them more loopholes and more goodies and more advantages. And so we got to do something here. So with that, I just want to say PDA is the absolute best, and we love you guys, and we are so honored to be working with you on the Hill. But my staff is telling me I got to go vote. So thanks again. We'll be with you all the way. All right.
In our letter drive.
Take care, guys.
All right. Yep, no problem. All right, folks, thank you to Representative Hank Johnson and Representative Keith Ellison. Andrea said, my name's Conor Boylan. I'm the other director of PDA. I just want to briefly just give a quick shout out to the folks who are watching the live stream with us today. A lot of those folks dropped letters at their members of Congress's offices this morning and are joining us now. We had over 200 letters dropped around the country this morning, along with phone calls by our national phone bank team under the leadership of Mike Fox. And also, we're doing faxes into many offices as well. Judy Hess and Deborah Schusterin as well of the national team are making faxes right now. So just a big shout out to the team. It's a real team effort on this day while Andre and I are hanging out in DC doing these cool interviews. So hi to everybody at home. So our next guest is Marge Baker. Marge Baker is from the People for the American Way. If folks were following last week, there was a historic vote in the Senate, HJ Res 19, a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. It was an exciting vote. We, PDA, were part of a large coalition of groups to really push that forward. And again, our team in the congressional districts and states around the country delivered petitions, organized media events, really, really exciting work. So we're proud to be part of this coalition. This is only the beginning. We've come a long way since that disastrous Citizens United decision, and the work is only going to continue to move forward. So Marge is going to quickly recap that vote and talk about next steps. Marge?
Great. Thank you so much for having me here today. And it was an historic week last week. I mean, we went from 4 sponsors of a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United and cases like Citizens United to get big money out of politics. 4 sponsors right after the decision was announced, to 55 senators on record last week in support of a constitutional amendment, just 12 shy of the 2/3 we need. There are companion measures, SJ Res 19 in the Senate and HJ Res 119 in the House. And I absolutely have to say, what we did last week is we brought the grassroots, we brought the American people to Washington to demand action, and that's why we got action, and it is absolutely because of the organizing that's been going on around the country that made the difference. We delivered 3.2 million petition signatures, 3.2 million petition signatures to the House and Senate urging action on this. And the reason we got that many, I have to say, is because of the work that the PDA did. We were able to tell activists around the country that PDA was going to make sure these petitions got delivered, and you did. And that's huge. I can't tell you how much it means for activists to know they're not just signing a piece of paper, their voice is going to be heard. So it was huge. And the work you did organizing petition delivery events and rallies and getting these petitions in the hands of the senators was huge, huge, huge. So huge shout out to PDA for all the work that you've done. It's enormous contribution to this groundswell of grassroots support. So kind of next steps are really threefold. One is we had a vote, so we know which side of history 100 senators are, right? And 55 are on the right side and 45 are not. And they all need to hear from us. So if you have a minute, pick up the phone. We can get you what the vote count was, but make sure the senators who voted the right way hear your thanks, and make sure the senators who didn't vote the right way know that you're looking over their shoulder. It's huge, because this isn't going away. There will be more votes. This is the first of many votes. So that accountability piece is huge. If you have a little bit more time, you can do a letter to the editor, an op-ed, or find somebody in your community who can do that. Really, really huge, especially in the states of the senators who voted the wrong way. Okay? This is the only place in D.C. in the country that this is a partisan issue is D.C. 3 out of 4 Americans support amending the Constitution to get big money out of politics. The polling shows a 26-point advantage among Republicans on this issue. So the only place we're not getting bipartisan support is in the halls of Congress, and so we have to do something about that. And then the last thing, so accountability calls into Senate offices, letters to the editors, op-eds, and the third thing is there's a companion measure, HJ Res 119. I think it currently has 122 co-sponsors. We should be over 200. We should be over 200. We just haven't really focused like a laser beam because things were happening on the Senate side. Really, really, really important. They're gonna go out in a couple days, but they're gonna be back for lame duck. And so through the end of this year, we have an opportunity to build those co-sponsors. And we ought to get to more than 200. We can do that in the House. And so that's gonna take some concerted effort and help, at the grassroots end here in DC, making sure we're knocking on those doors literally and figuratively to get the House co-sponsors. So again, just appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this. Thank you for all the work you did. I really mean we would not be where we were had it not been for the energy and the commitment of PDA. So thank you so much, and onward.
Thank you, Marge. Marge, I just want you to know that there are at least 4 of us in this room and we don't have a lot of people here who participated in the drops. I know I did Richmond, Stephen did Vienna. My son just left the room. He was also in Richmond. And the HJ Res 119 is going to be in the letter drop this month.
Oh, that's great.
So we're pushing it this month.
Awesome. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. It really made all the difference. Thank you.
It was marvelous working with your group. Thank you so very much.
Yep. Thanks, Marge. And to add to that as well, Kelly Johnson, who's in the room out of Massachusetts, dropped a petition off at Senator Elizabeth Warren's Boston office as well. So, again, great strength in this small room alone. We had a lot of activism going on. So just moving along with the program, to my left, we see Stephen Miles. Stephen is going to update us, Stephen from Win Without War is going to update us on the situation in Iraq and Syria right now. Obviously, very worrying times. There are some votes going on right now on next steps around that. So PDA have been out front on that. There was a national call-in day yesterday speaking out against any drumbeat to war. If people are watching the national mainstream media, there's a lot going on that side right now. So worrying times, deja vu, et cetera, et cetera. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Stephen on to update us on the situation and what's going on.
Sure. Thanks, Connor and Andrea. Thanks to everybody for coming out. I'll try to be brief. I want to echo what Marge just said and thank PDA for all the great work you guys have been doing and the folks watching at home and around the country. Yesterday, PDA took part, as Connor said, in a National Day of Action, over 24 organizations, sending voices into Congress, skeptical about what our latest misadventures in the Middle East are going to happen. There was more than 11,000 phone calls made to Congress just yesterday. There's more being made as we speak. And it's a really strong outpouring of real skepticism, opposition, and concern over yet another open-ended war in the Middle East. It's a challenging and complicated situation. I'll talk about the situation maybe in a second. And I know that Congressman McGovern, I think, is still planning on coming probably after votes, and the congressman can tell you much more eloquently, because he's a congressman and good at that sort of thing, than I can, and he was great on the floor yesterday talking about it. So I'm sure he'll have a few words to say. But the House is voting today. They're voting right now on some other things. Later this afternoon, they'll be voting on an amendment to the continuing resolution that would authorize the arming and trading of the so-called moderate rebels in Syria, kind of some of these groups that we quote-unquote vet and make sure they're on our side. This is one part of what the president's announced in terms of his escalation of the conflict. The other part is a stepped-up aerial bombing campaign. It was begun earlier this week with, we already had about 160 airstrikes in Iraq. Up until I think it was yesterday, they were all kind of either saving the Yazidis on the mountain, defending the Kurds near Erbil, or several airstrikes around the Mosul Dam and the Haditha Dam, kind of key pieces of infrastructure. Yesterday's airstrikes were something. Excuse me. Yesterday's airstrikes were something different. They were. Sorry. Excuse me. They were us being the Iraqi Air Force in what is a sectarian war. The Iraqi military forces outside of Baghdad are locked in a pitched battle with Sunni militants, the most famous of which is ISIS, but by no means the only combatant on the side of the battle on ISIS's side. And we served as the Air Force in those attacks, and that is going to continue escalating, and that's what's proposed for happening in Syria as well across the border, where we will essentially serve as kind of an air force for a faction of what is a many-part civil war. The reality of the conflict, if we take a step back, is that from the Mediterranean to the Tigris and Euphrates, you have a massive conflict that has well over 1,000 known armed groups. It's 1,000 different groups taking part in this conflict. It primarily falls down along sectarian lines. This is, I think, not unfamiliar terms to folks: Sunni, Shia, Alawite, others, Kurdish, but by no means only. Within the Sunni movement, within the Sunni regions of Iraq, for example, there are dramatically different forces at play. There's some tribal militias. There are former Saddam regime officials and militias, former Baathists. This is a complicated region in which there are probably hundreds of thousands of people in arms on all sides, and of which ISIS, the group that we've heard so much about, is one factor. They have somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30,000 people, quote unquote, under their control, as the estimates are by the intelligence community. But we have to put that in perspective. This is a region in which the Sunni population in which they're operating is 20 to 30 million people. So this is a small group of people we're talking about. And that gets to, what do we need to be doing about this? The reality is, as the president has said, and he deserves credit for saying this, the reality is that there will only be a political solution to this. You take an example, the fall of Mosul, which happened earlier this year, which was kind of the precipitating factor of a lot of this. Mosul's a town of 2 to 3 million people. At the time, ISIS had somewhere around 3,000 fighters involved in that. You don't take over a town of 3 million people with 3,000 fighters. It just doesn't happen. The Iraqi military forces at the time outnumbered by an order of 1,000 to 1 ISIS's fighters. You can't do that. You can't see that battle lose if two things don't happen. One is the Iraqi forces weren't willing to stand up and fight for their own country. But the other is that Sunni tribal leaders, Sunni citizens, and others said, we don't want to live under this brutal, oppressive regime of Nouri al-Maliki. And we've seen that as well in Syria with President Assad. When people don't want to live under a brutally oppressive government, they are willing to do things as unimaginable as living under the brutally repressive horror that is ISIS, right? And until and unless you solve those underlying political dynamics, something that you cannot do with an American bomb, you will continue to have this conflict, and you will continue to make it worse by taking military action against it. So to take a step back, the U.S. needs to be thinking about kind of two things. One, how are we stopping the conflict? And that's a long process. That's one that the U.S. can play an effective role in doing things like providing humanitarian assistance. There's 4 to 5 million refugees, both internally displaced and in other countries. That's a massive refugee problem. That's larger than World War II. This is a really massive refugee crisis. But we also need to do some of the hard diplomacy that we haven't been doing. Things like ending the Syrian civil war through a diplomatic settlement, bringing in the Iranians, bringing in the Saudis, bringing in the Turks and the others that are at the table, and having that kind of solution. But America has self-interest in this too, right? We've all seen the brutal beheadings of American journalists. And Americans rightly are afraid of a group that has kind of really horrific violence at its core, in its nature. And so the question becomes, how do you deal with that? How do you address that threat? How do you keep America safe, in addition to ending the conflict in the region? And here again, we know what works and what doesn't. And what doesn't work is trying to bomb the problem away. We've been doing that for a decade in Yemen. There's more extremists in Yemen today than when we started. We've been doing it for a decade in Pakistan. There's more extremists in Pakistan than when we started. We've been doing it for 13 years in Afghanistan. There's more Taliban today than there were previously. This is not a solution to the problem. We have to alienate these groups and isolate them from the general public. We have to go after their financial flows, the massive revenue streams that they have selling oil on the black market and elsewhere. And we have to create institutions for people that they can have political representation. That's a long-term process, right? That's going to take a long time, and it's something that Iraqis and Syrians are going to have to do for themselves, but the U.S. can assist in. What we shouldn't do is bomb the problem to try to make it get better, because we'll make everything worse if we do that. So I'm going to end because I'm kind of ranting now and kind of up on my soapbox. The reason all that's important is because the American public right now is deeply concerned and conflicted on the issue. The polling is really fascinating on this. There was an NBC News poll that came out over the weekend that 62% of Americans think that support the airstrikes. That's very real. That's 62% of Americans support the airstrikes. 68% of Americans think they won't work. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? That tells you that Americans want to do something about this. They want to do something to feel safe. They want to do something to end the conflict. But they recognize that airstrikes don't work, right? But that's all that Washington, D.C. is offering them. When you invest, as we've talked a lot in the past about kind of the overinvestment in the Pentagon. When you spend $1 trillion a year on your military, it's not surprising when that's the only thing you've got to deal with problems. Again, that's a long-term solution. But we need to recognize that Americans are concerned about this. But we need to motivate, educate, and mobilize people to take action and say, we want you to do something, but we don't want you to do the wrong thing. So PDA helped do that yesterday. There's going to be a lot more opportunities to do that. There's going to be opportunities in the election coming up to hold accountable people like Lindsey Graham, John McCain, and Kelly Ayotte, who yesterday were calling for ground troops in Iraq. This isn't bombing. These are folks who are saying it was a mistake to end the Iraq war, and we need to go back in with tens of thousands of American troops. People need to know that. They need to remember that, and they need to think about that when they head to the ballot box this November. And then lastly, we need to hold our elected officials accountable. You know, everybody's going to leave town tomorrow in Washington, D.C. They're going to be gone for 2 months. This war is going to be going on while they're gone. They haven't decided the fundamental question of whether or not to authorize this war. They've said, we're going to come back to that after the election. We need demands that Congress do their job. We need to demand that they debate this, that they don't just rush it through and have some sort of show vote like they're doing this week. They need to have an honest, open conversation. They need to ask the hard questions, and they need to demand the answers from the administration. And hopefully, through the next several months, we'll be taking that fight to members of Congress, taking that fight to the administration, and PDA, I'm sure, will be right there with us along the way. And we couldn't be happier and kind of end with Tim's old admonition. You know, you only get this done with teamwork. And so very happy to be here, and thank you guys for having me.
Mimi. Our next speaker is going to be our advisory board chair, Mimi Kennedy.
All right, so folks at home and folks in the audience, this is Mimi's first Progressive Roundtable. She's often talked about joining us, but Mimi has a very busy schedule, as folks may know. But this is our first one, so she is our advisory board chair, so we're very excited to have her here. She is a member of a union, and she's going to talk about the importance that unions play and the need to keep unions, relevant. Mimi.
I'm usually home doing the letter drop, Connor, and reporting back to you after taking a picture of myself, Kat Schneider, and members of our team, my husband sometimes, Larry Dilge. And I'm seeing Mr. Cardenas' chief of staff later. So it's great to be here. I wore a blue blazer in honor of Tim. Didn't he always used to? He never wore anything. But anyway, I'm really glad to follow Win Without War, because what so many times PDA has tried to remind people of is that we're spun into war over and over, and it seems the closer we get to a progressive agenda in this country, which we are due to the collapse of our economy, and the crawling back that we're trying to do, and many working people have not done. And even if they do have jobs, again, they're finding that life is unaffordable, and they're being asked for money at every turn. Everything is monetized, and slowly it's dawning on the American people that their government damn well should do something instead of nothing, and that is make life work for us. However, being in the halls of Congress today, there's a palpable sense of what goes on when the possibility of war looms its head in the corridors of power. And for some, it's galvanizing, and you can tell that they feel, now we can do something. John Boehner was quoted today in the Washington Post Extra, which is free, and on the bus benches for free. I picked it up. I have it there in my purse, and I'm going to show it to you before I finish talking. If somebody could bring me up that big black bag where I was sitting. John Boehner was actually quoted as saying, regarding the airstrikes, he said, well, there's no reason for us not to do what the president has asked us to do. Well, wouldn't it be nice if he had said that on thousands of other proposals that this administration has asked John Boehner to do? I will show you the cover of the magazine, which shows Mr. Boehner in his exercise gear. And hello, it's the clue phone. It's for you. When you're doing nothing in Congress for your salary, and we know it, don't be on the cover of a magazine in your leisure exercise gear, showing us that's how you're spending your time. It's just a bad political idea. Which leads me to unions. Because people like I would say John Boehner, I don't mean to vilify only him. It is a sense in America that unions used to be about making demands that you were just going to be lazy and do nothing. Yeah, you wanted a 40-hour work week. Yeah, you wanted weekends. Yeah, the children wanted to go to school instead of labor. There were people who were against these things. And there is still a feeling afoot that if we have organized unions again in these right-to-work states, or we let people organize in order to negotiate with these mega corporations that are now global, but at least negotiate with in their workplace, that they're going to just want to kick back and slide on their entitlements. People like that are making fantastical images of working people that, in fact, in their minds look like this. In fact, and we all know this, working people are working harder than they ever have for less money. Their salaries have not gone up really considerably since the 1970s. They're being sold everything by the corporations, and they just want a little bit more. What our health care, we wanted single-payer health care. What we got was profit corporations selling health care and saying, you can afford it, it's only, and then it's something almost unaffordable. You can have a college education, here's a loan, you'll be paying it off with your Social Security. As Keith Ellison said, the only way to change this around is to have organized workplaces, where working people sit down in a respectful way, I might say. My husband is the union leader for the teachers at his independent school. It doesn't have to be adversarial and conflict. This is about sharing the wealth and keeping the workforce healthy, motivated, and informed. And unions are, in fact, incubators of democracy. When what you're fighting for and being in solidarity with your fellow worker instead of in competition with them, which is what the corporations want, Darwinian survival of the fittest. So, the sick fall by the wayside and we'll hire another guy who's dying for a job and will work for very little. Instead, there's solidarity with your fellow workers, and you all, one for all for one. And my union, SAG, to which you referred, I think is a great model for the country. We all know that there are fantastically wealthy actors. I mentioned that they were in the 1%, but in fact, probably no actor earns enough to be in the 1%. Probably not. We're not hedge fund managers. But we have fantastically wealthy people in Screen Actors Guild. We have richly paid people, such as I am this year on a sitcom, a network sitcom. We have people who are pretty well paid, who are working actors, who get enough well-paying jobs because of the union to do very well. And then they slide for the careers as I have, where they go cold and nobody wants to hire them and they have to live off their savings, and that can get very tricky. But the Screen Actors Guild has a great health care plan. It has very good retirement benefits, and that's because the wealthy among us pay their fair share to make sure the union stays strong, the union is strong in negotiations, and the union is well-funded for its pension and its wonderful health benefits. That's a model for this country. And if the wealthy in this country would pay their fair share in taxes, stop fighting union organizing so that the workers of this country could be at the table in terms of sharing the wealth and also having a good health plan and time to exercise and having money to educate their children, then I think this country could work again. We wouldn't be talked into a war to up the economy, the economic spending wastefully on the credit card every 2 years. And that's why unions are still important. So you heard from Keith that it's only 8 or 9% of the American workforce that is unionized now, but it's well over 50% of workers who want a union. What's holding us back? Well, guess. Corporate power, which at every turn seems to trump government power now, but that's because we have lacked will. We have lacked, as the American people, the sense to elect people who are more friendly to the idea of workplace democracy and government and governance and United States democracy. So we got to support Keith's bill, because I think if there is a law enforced that people are allowed to organize, they can't be intimidated out of it, it's going to be a lot healthier country. So thank you.
Thank you, Mimi.
Thanks, Mimi. And just to continue the trend of talking about the struggle, the fight for a labour union and the fight against income inequality in this country, we've got Paco Fabian, who's part of the Fight for 15. As part of he's off Change to Win. If folks haven't seen any of this, there's some fantastic actions happening around the country with fast food workers and retail workers. The fight for $15. We've seen some victories already out in Seattle. So Paco's going to give us an update on this exciting campaign and talk about where they're going from here. Paco.
Thank you for the introduction, and thank you very much, everybody, for having me here. It's my first time speaking in front of PDA, so thank you very much. Hi to those at home as well. So my name is Paco Fabian. I'm the communications director at Change to Win, which is a federation of labor unions that includes the SEIU, the Teamsters, the United Farm Workers, and the United Food and Commercial Workers. And over the last probably 5 years, I think Keith mentioned it, Mimi mentioned this as well, there's been a pretty steady decline in the labor density of the workforce in this country. I think the number that Keith used was about 8 or 9%. It's actually probably closer to 7 and dropping rapidly. And so at Change to Win, we started to think about how we could sort of move the density dial in the other direction. And started thinking about how we could run some innovative campaigns that would help us do that. And so, at the time we were thinking about this stuff, the talk in economics around the country was all about deficits and debt ceilings, right? And income inequality was really not sort of the term that people were using at the time to describe what was going on in the economy. And then, we had moments like the Occupy movement happen, and we had tours that we did with members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and others to sort of listen to what people were saying out, not here in Washington, D.C., but out in the rest of the country. What were people feeling? The fact that people were working harder than ever but earning less than ever before. Workers working full-time, busting their butts, and still having to rely on public assistance in order to feed their families or put a roof over their heads. And so, what we started to see was this sort of uprising of workers, right? I think it started really with Walmart workers a few years ago. Then we started to see port truck drivers out in L.A. Go on strike. These are port truck drivers that their employers misclassify as independent contractors, right? So they're responsible for the fuel in their trucks, they're responsible for the insurance, they're responsible for everything, and there's nothing that the employer is responsible for other than collecting money from their clients, right? We've seen here in Washington, D.C., low-wage federal contract workers go on strike. These are folks that work in federal buildings, serving food, mopping up, that are suffering the same sort of conditions that other low-wage workers are across the country. Warehouse workers that are part of the supply chain in this country, same kind of deal, right? Misclassified as independent contractors. And so we started seeing all this stuff happen and decided to do something about it. Started working with the folks that were standing up and trying to lift up their stories. Then, most recently, I think we've seen on September 4th, one of the largest sort of mobilizations that the country has ever seen as far as fast food workers going on strike in 150 cities and towns all over the country. It's clearly, something's changed, right? And we've seen, I think, the fruits of that to some degree in all the different campaigns. For example, the Walmart campaign was able to change Walmart's policy towards pregnancy and pregnant workers, right? We've seen the National Labor Relations Board decide that because McDonald's, the corporation, exerts so much control over the way its franchisees operate, that it bears some responsibility for the way that the workers are being treated. So McDonald's doesn't have the ability anymore to sort of say, well, they're not my employees, they're the franchisee's employees, and I have nothing to do with it, right? The company exerts so much control over the way their franchises operate that it does, in fact, bear some responsibility. And here in Washington, D.C., the low-wage federal contract workers that are under the banner of Good Jobs Nation, which is the name of their campaign, have actually gone on strike 7 times over the last 2 years, and have won some significant changes. They got the president to sign an executive order to raise their wages to $10.10 an hour. And most recently, the president also signed an executive order saying that if you're going to do business with the federal government as a private company, then there's going to be some certain standards you're going to have to meet, right? It's a legal compliance executive order. If you're a repeat violator of labor law, health and safety, wage and hour, then we're going to seriously consider whether or not you get another contract, which is all great. And then, we have the fast food stuff happening. So all this stuff is going to continue to happen. I think, there's nothing necessarily on the calendar yet, but all this activity is just growing. I think we've seen it, in particular with the fast food fight, where it started out in New York, it started spreading to different cities, and this last time around it was 150 cities, and there was civil disobedience. 500 workers got arrested. One member of Congress, Gwen Moore from Wisconsin, was arrested as well. And the CPC has actually been really instrumental in helping to push this. They've been on the picket lines with workers, using their megaphones in the press and other places to talk about these issues. And even, amazingly enough, and I don't know a lot of people don't know about this, but during the appropriations process, the CPC was able to insert amendments into appropriations bills that basically said none of this money can be used with companies that have engaged in wage theft or other labor law violations. And surprisingly, and I think this speaks a little bit to the moment that we're in this country, they were even able to pass these with 25, 30 Republicans voting in favor of these amendments being applied in appropriations bills, including the Defense Appropriations Bill and the Agriculture Appropriations Bill. So I think that speaks really to the atmosphere has changed in this country, where, as I mentioned earlier, the talk in 2010, 2011 was all about deficits and debt ceilings, and all this activity has really helped to change that conversation. I think we're in a real sort of populist moment in the country. There's more that the president could do to lead. The example that I keep coming back to is this $10.10 an hour executive order that he signed. It had a ripple effect beyond sort of just federal contract workers and those workers that are touched by the federal government. As soon as the president made that announcement, the Gap decided to raise its wages to $10.10. IKEA has said it's going to raise its wages. A bunch of different other state and local authorities decided to raise their wages, culminating with Seattle raising its wages to $15 an hour. So, what the president can do, and as far as lead by example matters, there's two more things I think that he could do before he leaves office, and if he doesn't, it's certainly something that we will push the next candidates on, and that is a model employer executive order, which means, the current way that the federal government does procurement is the lowest bidder gets the contract, because that's assumed to be the cheapest, the least expensive for taxpayers, right? But at the end of the day, it ends up being more expensive, right? These workers, the lowest bidder tends to be the one that violates labor law, that cuts corners here and there, and their employees tend to be on public assistance, right? So he could do a model employer executive order, which would give preferences to companies that pay good wages, have unions, provide benefits, and give our taxpayer money to those companies and not to the ones that are, cutting corners at the expense of workers. And the other thing he could do, frankly, is introduce a preference for labor peace agreements, right? So if you are a company that has a union and you already have a labor peace agreement, you get a leg up over the company that doesn't. Why? Because unions tend to negotiate for better wages, benefits, and other things for their workers, so that automatically the standards get raised. So I think the fight's going to continue. We're going to see a lot more activity, I think, this winter and going into next year. And as the election cycle ramps up for the presidential next president, I think we'll see, this issue become more and more prominent. The one thing, that I would ask you guys to think about is, how can we turn the use of taxpayer dollars to create not poverty-level wages but good jobs into a progressive issue, right? How can we turn that into something that, as progressives, we're discussing the economy, that we always come back to, are we going to use taxpayer dollars in a way that's going to create good jobs, livable wages, the way for a worker to be able to support his or her family? Or are we going to continue to give the money to the lowest bidder who's going to pay the least, in some cases even illegally less than they should, in order to continue doing business with the federal government, which is our tax money? That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions. If anybody has any questions for Paco, I know Stephen's getting ready to run, so we'll do questions. No? Oh, go ahead, Diana.
I just wanted to make a comment on what you were saying. A lot of us that are veterans and a lot of our military compadres look at these issues with Iraq and we say humanitarian objectives. The military loves doing that. It makes them feel a lot better, and they've got wonderful skill sets. There's a way they can do this through humanitarian efforts and winning over the hearts and minds of the people. rather than going in and dropping bombs, because there's a lot of us that are not on board with this either. But people want something done. I would say, don't forget about the military from that side of it, because they're very, very good at humanitarian effort.
My name is Monisha. I'm also a veteran, and I subscribe to some alternative news sources. And this morning, I actually read about Joint Chief Chairman Martin Dempsey and what he said to a Senate committee, that he's optimistic about the airstrikes, but if they don't work, he'll make a recommendation that we put troops on the ground. So I would really like to connect with you if possible. I know people in Iraq Veterans Against the War and Psychologists for Social Responsibility. I'm a student member there, so it's important. Thank you.
Our guest did such an incredible job. There don't seem to be any questions. So this is really, 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 really great. This is really great. Marvelous. So, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. Paco, if you're going, thank you very, very much. And we will definitely have you back, because labor and wages, critical progressive issue. All right? The key to household stability. Jim's not here, so go Jasmine. Our next guest, I want to bring up Miss Jasmine Jefferson. And Jasmine is with Social Security Works. Now, last year, we were all doing a lot of work against the change CPI. We were doing all kinds of work saying, don't cut benefits. And just when it looked like we had actually won that fight, they came up with another tactic. So I'm going to let Jasmine talk about that. So Jasmine, welcome.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you all in the room for having me, and thank you all at home. Again, my name is Jasmine Jefferson. I'm the Legislative Associate at Social Security Work. And so, like Andrea alluded to, what's happened recently is the Social Security Administration has started closing local offices in states without much notice to citizens and without necessarily just cause. And so what we've been doing is working with AFGE to put together a petition. And also we've worked with Senator Schumer, and he's put out a bill so that SSA, when they do want to close an office, they have to come up with a reason, a good reason to close that office, because us as citizens, we pay for those services. That's what we do with when we pay into the Social Security fund. We are paying for those services, and people should expect to have those services. SSA is the face of the federal government for a lot of people, and so we've been fighting, like I said, with AFGE and with Senator Schumer for that. And so the bill number for that, because I'm sure someone will ask, is S2742. So if you're interested, we have a petition, like I said. You can Google probably AFG office closings and sign that petition if you're interested. And also reach out to your members and ask them to serve as co-sponsors for Senator Schumer's bill. I believe that Mark Begich, Patty Murray, and Senator Nelson from Florida are all co-sponsors currently, and then Representative Collins is going to sponsor the bill in the House. So again, this is something that's bipartisan. It's bipartisan. So we're looking forward to your support on that. And then also upcoming, just to go a little bit off the track of office closings, the elections are very important, and Social Security has paid, or has been a really big influence on some races. Just as a takeaway, the expansion message is working. Some candidates have used that, and it's like I said, it's working. So in Hawaii, for example, you have Senator Schatz, and he beat Hannah Busa, and we believe that was because of his messaging on Social Security. And so what we have done recently is, along with the Center for Community Change Action, CCC, we did some polling, and we found out that, again, the expansion message works amongst voters. So the takeaways from our polling is that, number one, voters want they want their Social Security benefits to be increased. Number two, we know that voters will reward members who vote to increase their benefits. And we also know that voters will punish or not vote for members who vote to cut their benefits. So this is something that's working. We encourage you all to support those candidates who are pushing for the expansion message and to get behind those campaigns 100%. One we're looking at in particular is Bruce Braley. I'm sure, as some of you have seen in the polling, he's down right now one point in his race in Iowa. And we think that if he comes out with a clear message to support expansion, that he could win his race. Quite frankly, his opponent is extremely conservative, not so much a supporter of Social Security, wants to privatize Social Security. And so we want to see him win, and we believe that he can win if he comes out in favor of expansion. So that's just a little bit about what's happening in November. Also, I was reminded to tell you all that no matter what happens in the Senate, we don't believe that Social Security will be part of a grand bargain. We don't expect that. So that's just important to note, regardless of what happens in the Senate. And then I have a couple other things that are important, if I have the time. Thank you. So number one, this is very I guess, in the Times tomorrow. There's a rally that some of the Democrats will be doing, and it's happening in the Upper Senate Park at 1:30, and it's a Social Security and Medicare rally. Senator Elizabeth Warren will be there, and I've also been told to caveat that with we did not exactly get a part in planning the entire thing, so the messaging is a little off. So we had to fight for people to say that we're not fighting anti-privatization. We pushed them towards no cuts. We weren't able to push them toward expansion, but we know that Elizabeth Warren will be there, like I said, Senator Warren, and then also AFT will be there as well, and they will be talking about expansion. So again, I have flyers for that. If you all want to come out again, that's at 1:30 tomorrow, September the 18th. So we look forward to having you there. We will be there. And then lastly, another part of our strategy in January is that we will be releasing a book. Our co-founders, Nancy Altman and Eric Kingson, wrote a book. It's named after our organization, Social Security Works. And it's a book totally about expansion. I had the chance to go through it recently, and it's great. I mean, it really breaks down how do we expand Social Security and why it'll work for us and why we should expand Social Security. So we look forward to that release. That's in January. I have some cards on that book. If you would like to grab those, I'll be here at the end of the meeting. But I think that pretty much covers everything that I have. So again, I just want to reinforce we are so grateful for all the work that you all do on the ground. Our cause would not, it wouldn't have the traction that it has without people on the ground and doing the grassroots work. So we're thankful for PDA. We're thankful for all you do, and thank you all for the time.
Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Jasmine? Rick and Stephen, we're going to need to send the microphone back.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Yes, I recently had to go to a Social Security office, and another interesting thing they're doing, the office is only open 9:30 to 2:30, 4 days a week in our community. And I made an appointment for a good reason. This is an important year for me. And you had to wait like 50 days for an appointment.
Yeah. Yep.
Just.
That is absolutely what's happening.
All right, well, any other questions? Another fabulous presentation where we don't have any questions. All right, thank you so much, Jasmine. Thank you. There was a tremendous amount of activity last week on a couple of issues, and one of the issues very much near and dear to my heart is the Equal Rights Amendment. So I'm going to have one of the other co-leaders of the ERA three-state strategy team, Tammy Simpkins, come up and join us up here at front to talk about our ERA Day of Action, which we've been working on for a long time. So thanks for joining us, Tammy.
Thanks for having me here. Such a pleasure and delight to be here in person. Yeah. As Andrea said, well, first let me wish you all a happy Constitution Day. Today's Constitution Day, but we women of the country are not recognized fully in our Constitution. And here we are today talking about having to fight the fact that corporations are seen as people here in the United States. But women, no, we're not. So we went up to the Hill on Friday and we demanded some action, and that's the button right here that I'm wearing. We demand that the time limit be removed for ratifying the ERA. And we had 142 activists join us from all across the country, around 31 states. We visited 173 offices, and we delivered petitions from Credo, where we have nearly 50,000 signatures on those petitions. We want the deadline removed, and Congress has the ability to do that. We have SJ Res 15 in the Senate. That's Senator Cardin's bill. Senator Cardin has bipartisan support on that. The ERA is a nonpartisan bill. It was actually first introduced 91 years ago, back in 1923, by Republicans. Alice Paul, who wrote the bill, was a Republican, and it was introduced in the House and the Senate in December of 1923 by Republicans. 1972, it passed out of the House and the Senate, went out for state ratification, and unfortunately, there was a lot of pushback on that. And we weren't able to. They put a time limit on our ratification process of 7 years. Congress extended that deadline to 10 years. So if they can extend it, they can remove it, and that's what we're demanding. And we need everybody involved in this. We need you calling your congresspeople, your senators, and we need men involved in this. This is not just a women's issue. This is a human rights issue. This is a civil rights issue. This is an economic issue. And it's very disgraceful that we're talking about going to war, possibly again, spreading democracy, supposedly, when we don't even have it here for more than half the citizens of our country. It's outrageous, and we're demanding some action on this. So please, please, please get involved. Get involved with PDA. I would like to mention that PDA is the first national organization, multi-issue organization to take this on. Our late great Tim Carpenter saw that he recognized the need for this, and we took this issue on, the first to do it in decades, and that's why it has gained so much traction. It's a movement now. I think we can call it a movement now, right, Andrew? Here, right? So please, everybody, get involved in this, and let's get this done once and for all. And may I also give a little shout out to my colleague, Kathy Kalin, our other co-leader, who unfortunately is back at the hotel under the weather. She wanted to be here today. Yeah, big Kathy. So.
Thanks, Tammy. Thanks. One of the things that makes PDA really fun, a fun fun place to be is all the issue teams that we work on. So we also, on Monday, had another really big day, and I saw Anise Jenkins come in the back from Stand Up for Democracy DC. Anise, come on down. Let's talk about Monday afternoon here in the U.S. Senate for the great city of Washington, D.C., hoping to be the state of New Columbia.
Well, thank you. First of all, it was my pleasure to join for the ratification for ERA. I feel we were there Friday lobbying, and also we were there in the wonderful rain that we had on Saturday. And it just helped to confirm the fact that these causes all are one. We're trying to expand democracy. We're just trying to make the Constitution and the spirit live. So on Monday, we had a wonderful hearing in the Senate, in the United States Senate, for S-132, which is the New Columbia Admissions Act, which would make this non-federal part of Washington, D.C., outside the White House and the mall and all of that, the 51st state of the United States. It would enfranchise and make real citizens of the 650,000 people in Washington, D.C., who pay the highest federal taxes in the country, who serve in the military, who have no voice. The only country in the democratic world that excludes the people who live in its capital from having any voice, any say-so. So we want to thank PDA. PDA jumped on this issue, full force, both feet into it. And we just want to thank you. This is an ongoing struggle that has been going on since we were a capital in it's been 213 years. You can figure that out. It was 1801 when we became the capital, and we're still fighting, and it's just wonderful to have a national organization like PDA join us. So it was a wonderful day, the first hearing in 20 years that we've had in the United States Senate. It was wonderful. And I hope that anyone watching will contact your congressperson, your senator. We don't have say-so, so we don't have voting representation in the House and the Senate. But I hope that you will contact yours and say that we support the extension of democracy, which includes ERA ratification and also includes statehood for the District of Columbia. Thank you so much, PDA.
Thank you, Anise. Thank you, Anise. I want to recognize some very, very special guests that we had an opportunity to meet personally on Friday. Diana Danis, and Monisha. And Monisha, I'm great with your first name. Your last name, Rios. I can do that. I can do that. We have the luxury of some time. Normally, we're always racing. So, Diana, would you care to come up just for a moment and talk about the military women that we're going to be working with? I'm going to move this chair back. Right, it's kind of a tight room here. Yeah, you are. I mean, Diana was a fabulous speaker on Friday. So, Diana, tell us a little bit about what you're fighting for, because PDA, we've endorsed legislation, and we're going to be working side by side with you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much for giving us just a moment. We think it's very, very important for women, veterans, women in the military, to have a voice with these issues, because for one thing, we have all fought and put on that uniform without the benefit of constitutional equality, which really, if you're willing to die, you should be a citizen with full constitutional equality. Secondly, most of us are not thrilled with this concept of going to war again. When you've been out there, you find out very quickly this is a bad idea. It's dangerous, and you're very confused when you're young and you're in the service and you're not quite sure what's going on. And it's difficult. We also have issues of rape, assault, sexual harassment, and we know that you cannot train rape out of culture. You have to lead rape out of culture, and the way you do that is you change the culture. We are a very, very small population, as the military itself in a country of 317 million people. The women in the military are only, our total numbers are 18%, 15% if you add all of them up, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, National Guard, and Reserves. And with the VA, we obviously have some issues, and all of these come back to retaliation, retribution. Does this sound similar with any of the other issues we're dealing with? They're all human rights issues. They use the same tactics with everything. And it's very difficult when you're a tiny population and you suffer retaliation. And the victim blame is the same all the way across the board on whatever human rights issue it is. When the victim is their fault the war, it's their fault they got raped, it's their fault they had kids, it's everything is somebody else's fault. They revere women and children, which I'm still concerned about. So, at least they say stuff like that. So our bottom line is we want people to take a very, very critical look at the military as a place to change culture. When you're running 57% of the tax dollars in this country into one department of government, you have incredible power. The military has led the way on every civil rights issue. It led the way on desegregation. It led the way on the civil rights marches and getting that out and getting people empowered to participate. It led the way once they dropped a mask don't tell, that meant LGBT people had a chance to go forward for marriage equality. We know they can lead the way on changing the culture, but we have to have everybody working with us, and we want to work with everybody else to get that done. There's just not enough of us by ourselves. And by the way, we have some incredible leaders, both men and women, among our veterans and among our military, who are willing to take on these challenges, but it's kind of scary when you stand up there by yourself. So we really appreciate it. We'll ride the wave, and we'll do everything we can to work with you. And we appreciate finally getting a seat at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. And we are going to have some great doings coming up on Sunday in the Grand City of New York. Emily, come on. Oh, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, come on down. And she brought presents for us, so she can talk about the climate march and what she's brought. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you. So I don't have that much to update you guys on, except to remind you that the big climate march is this Sunday, the 21st, I think it's Sunday, in New York City. And the biggest thing for us now is that we've introduced a new report on the case on why we should ban fracking. And we first introduced a report in 2011, the case for a ban on fracking. And since that time, over 150 scientific articles have caught up, and the mounting evidence is now there, again, that, fracking is inherently dangerous. And we need to start getting our representatives to act on that. And so what I did was we don't have the published copies yet, but we're getting them. So feel free to email me if you want more information. But I just want to make sure everyone took one of these, or take a few of these and pass them around, because it's really important. Thanks.
Okay, and thanks, Liz, and great. And Liz, can we do a link to this on our website so that people can get to the report? Okay, great. Connor's going to talk to you about the plans for what PDA is doing in New York at the march.
Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Liz. Yeah, just really briefly, PDA, we've been a strong presence in some of the organising for Sunday's event. Russell Green, who leads our issue organising team around climate change, has been leading up a lot of phone calls around this. So we have we're going to have a strong presence there on the ground. We're going to have banners there. You know, PDA will be marching in the rally itself. We're going to have a meet-up point. So the easiest way for people to get involved in that, if people just want to go to our website and click on events, you will see the march itself in New York on Sunday. You can just scroll down on the calendar. You can see it there. You can register there and get you all the information that you need if you're looking to join us on Sunday in New York City. So looking forward to that.
And also on climate, tonight at 8 o'clock, Reverend Lennox Yearwood is going to be interviewing Bill McKibben on PDA Radio. So if you go to www.pdamerica.org, there will be a link where you'll be able to listen live to that show. If you have any questions, because it is call-in talk radio, we also have the phone number there, so you'll be able to call in and ask a question of Bill McKibben and Reverend Yearwood. We have done something that hasn't happened in a really long time on the Roundtable. Well, one of our members of Congress wasn't able to appear, so we have actually gone through our agenda early. Do we have any other announcements from the floor? Come on down. Come on down.
I have a quick announcement.
Yes, I'll do that.
My name is Colleen. I'm here from Network, the National Catholic Social Justice Lobby. We represent the North American nuns. I'm here
Nuns on the bus.
Nuns on the bus. I'm here on behalf of actually Sister Marge Clark, who is in Des Moines, Iowa. We kicked off our third Nuns on the Bus tour this morning in Des Moines. We were joined by Vice President Biden for opening remarks, which was very exciting. This campaign, this bus tour, is centered, well, the title is We the People, We the Voters. So it's centered around getting out the vote and standing up to big money in politics, kind of what we've been discussing today. We also have resources available if you would like to pledge to make your workplace or your religious community a 100% voting community. So I have handouts available. You can also go to nunsonthebus.org to follow our progress on the tour, or just search the hashtag nunsonthebus on Twitter. It's hopefully pretty memorable. And I have some swag buttons and stickers available as well. So please talk to me afterwards if you have any more questions or want to make that pledge to be a voter or have a 100% voting community. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. That is wonderful. That is great. Any other announcements? We've got some new friends who have popped in the door. All righty. Mimi, we'd really love to have you come up and wrap up for us. All righty. Well, how was your first roundtable?
Well, it was fantastic, and it's because our co-directors, Connor Boylan and Andrea Miller, are doing a great job. I am really, really glad to be here. And all the speakers, to hear from women in military, nuns on the bus, DC votes. I was trying to get into the rooms at the Senate building, and you couldn't get in the overflow rooms. And I have heard that Andrea Miller and PDA were very much thanked for that thing having happened at all. So I want to know, thank you. I want everybody to know who watches on their computer, as I usually do at the end of the day or later in the week, that PDA is alive and well. Our co-executive directors are doing an amazing job. And the people with whom we are in coalition now are really our brothers and sisters in a way that Tim envisioned it. That for the past 10 years, we have built an organization that specifically did politics. You know, a lot of people say they don't want to do politics. They want to do something else and help in some other way. But this is where it all converges, because we are a constitutional democracy. We aspire to be. This is self-government. And I think the last thing I would say, with a nod to voting, is as the wife of a teacher, it has occurred to me, and an election integrity activist I am as well and have been for 10 years, A lot of people want to vote, but they regard it as an exam for which they have not sufficiently studied. And they don't know the answers to all the questions. Now, if you were in school and you could be sick on the day of a test that you hadn't studied for, you just might be sick that day or consider yourself lucky if you could avoid it. I want to tell people, and I hope that we can message, that this year, the federal races, the races at the top of the ticket, you will do great harm if you don't learn at least about those and vote, because if our federal government falls into the hands of a single party, the House and the Senate, we're going to get doing nothing. We're going to get talk about impeachment. We're going to get wasted tax dollars, the very thing the right wing says is a big sin. We're going to get war, easy to declare, not so easy to fight, as military people know. And so the federal races, you must vote in them. We want, of course, all of us to be involved and informed on every race down ballot, down to your county supervisors. Well, dog catcher is always the cliche, isn't it? I've never gotten to vote for a dog catcher, so I didn't use that cliche. But first do no harm is what a lot of people of good conscience think. I'm not going to go face that ballot because I could do a lot of harm voting for the wrong people. I understand that, but I want to say this year you will do great harm if you do not go and vote in those federal races. Good for you if you can figure it all out, down to the judges, all the way down the ballot. We'd like that. But first do no harm often is a good principle if you don't want to harm by just picking out somebody whose name you like. But the federal races, if you're watching this, you know about it, but tell your friends and neighbors they got to vote in those this year. That's how I'm going to wrap this up. So thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm so impressed. And am I really wrapping it up? Like I get to say aloha, goodbye, go with God. This is great. And thank you, everyone who's here and out in PDA land for all the work that you do. It's a lot, and it's having a big impact. Thank you.
Jocelyn, do you put your flyers there, folks there? Just hand them around and just these ones up here if you want to get the fracking stuff out.
Yeah. This right to my
Here, we've got fracking.
Folks, make sure you just